November the 10th, 2009. 6:25 a.m. A level crossing near Neustadt and Rübenberge, Germany. A train driver sees something upon the tracks ahead. He slams on the emergency brakes, but it's too late. Germany's number one goalkeeper, a father, a husband, a man who the entire nation was counting on for the World Cup, is gone in an instant. But Robert Enke's story doesn't begin here. This is where it tragically ends. What happened in the 8 years before this moment will break your heart. Robert Enke had everything, or at least that's what it looked like from the outside. By November 2009, he was 32 years old and at the absolute peak of his career. He was Hannover 96's captain and Germany's undisputed first-choice goalkeeper. The man who would guard the net at the 2010 World Cup in South Africa. Scouts, coaches and fans all agreed Enke was world class. But behind the saves, the clean sheets and the quiet confidence he projected on the pitch, Robert was fighting a war that nobody could see. This is a story of one of football's most devastating tragedies. A story about mental health, the crushing weight of expectation and the invisible battle that claimed the life of one of Germany's brightest stars. And it's a story that even today continues to save lives. Robert Enke was born on August 24th, 1977 in East Germany. He grew up in a modest household, but from an early age it was clear that he had a gift. He was tall, athletic and had reflexes that seemed almost superhuman. By the time he was a teenager, Enke was already turning heads. After Germany's reunification, he joined the youth academy of Carl Zeiss. And by 1996, at just 19 years old, he had made his professional debut. But Enke was hungry for more. In 1999, he made the move to Borussia Mönchengladbach, one of Germany's most historic clubs. It was there that the rest of Europe began to notice him. His performances were so impressive that in 2002, one of the biggest clubs in the world came calling. FC Barcelona. Think about that for a second. Robert Enke, a kid from East Germany, now playing for one of the most iconic teams in football history. He was living the dream. But dreams, as we know, don't always last. Enke's time at Barcelona was short and painful. He was the backup goalkeeper, and despite his talent, he couldn't break into the first team consistently. The pressure immense, the expectation suffocating. And for the first time in his life, Robert Enke began to feel something he'd never felt before. Doubt. But worse than just doubt, depression. In 2003, while still at Barcelona, Enke sought psychiatric help for the first time. He was diagnosed with clinical depression, a condition that he would battle for the rest of his remaining life. But there's a thing. He told almost nobody. Not his teammates, not the media, not even most of his family. Because professional footballers admitting you're struggling mentally, that was seen as a weakness, and a weakness that Enke believed would end his career. After Barcelona, Enke bounced around, a loan to Fenerbahce in Turkey, a season at Tenerife in Spain, but in 2004 he finally found stability when he signed for Hannover 96 in the Bundesliga. It was there in Hannover that Robert Enke began to rebuild his life. He married his longtime girlfriend, Theresa Popp, a former handball player. Together they seemed like the perfect couple, supportive, grounded and deeply in love. And in 2005 they welcomed their daughter, Lara, into the world. For a brief moment, everything seemed perfect. But then tragedy struck. Lara was born with a rare and serious heart defect. Despite multiple surgeries and the best medical care available, her condition was irreversible. On September the 10th, 2006, at just 2 years old, Lara sadly passed away. Robert and Theresa were devastated. Family described how Robert was a changed man after Lara's death. He became quieter, more withdrawn. The light in his eyes seemed to have dimmed. But publicly, he kept going. He played, he trained, he smiled for the cameras. Because that's what professional athletes do, right? They just push through it and stay strong. But inside, Robert was crumbling. His depression, which had been managed with therapy and medication, began to spiral. The grief of losing his daughter compounded everything. And despite continuing treatment, despite the love and the support of his wife, Robert felt himself slipping into a darkness he just could not escape. In 2008, Robert and Teresa adopted a baby girl, Layla. They hoped that building a family again might help heal wounds, and for a while it seemed to. Robert adored her. He was a devoted father, but the demons had never left him. By 2009, Enke, by all accounts, was at the top of his game. He was a captain of Hannover 96. He solidified his place as Germany's #1 goalkeeper, overtaking veteran Jens Lehmann and fending off competition from Alder. National team coach Joachim Low publicly stated that Enke would be the starting keeper for the 2010 FIFA World Cup. The entire nation was counting on him. But that expectation, that weight, was crushing. Enke lived in constant fear. Fear that his depression would be discovered. Fear that his mental health struggles would be seen as a liability. Fear that he'd lose his spot on the national team if anyone found out he was receiving psychiatric treatment. In Germany, as of most football at the time, mental health just wasn't something that you spoke about. The culture was one of toughness, resilience, mental strength. Admitting you were struggling, that was career suicide. So Enke hid it. He wore a mask. He performed brilliantly on the pitch, keeping clean sheet after clean sheet. But off the pitch, he was barely holding on. His therapist later revealed that Enke had expressed fears that if the media found out about his depression, they would destroy him. That tabloids would question his fitness to play, and that he'd be labelled weak or unstable. And so he suffered, in silence. Teresa knew, his doctors knew, but the world saw a confident, elite goalkeeper preparing for the biggest tournament of his life. Nobody saw the man sinking deeper and deeper into despair. November the 10th, 2009 started like any other day. Robert Enke trained with Hannover 96 in the morning. Teammates later said he seemed normal, maybe a little bit quiet, but there was nothing alarming. He went home to Teresa and Layla. But something was different that day. Around 5 p.m, Enke told Teresa he was going out to organise something. He kissed Layla goodbye and he left the house. He never came back. At approximately 6:25 p.m, near a railway crossing close to their home, Robert Enke stepped in front of an oncoming regional express train and passed away instantly. He left a note. In it, he apologised to his family, especially Teresa. He apologised to the doctors for not being strong enough, and he explained he could no longer bear the pressure, the fear, the overwhelming darkness that had consumed him. And he asked for forgiveness. He asked that his depression be made public so that others might understand. The news of Robert Enke's death sent shockwaves through Germany and the football world. The German national team's friendly match against Chile was immediately cancelled. Thousands of fans gathered at Hanover's arena for a public memorial service. Over 40,000 people attended. Players, coaches, fans, all united in grief. Jens Lehmann, his predecessor in goal, wept openly. Teammates spoke of a kind, gentle man who never let on how much pain he was in. Joachim Low called it the darkest day in the history of German football. But perhaps the most powerful voice was Teresa's. In the days following Robert's death, Teresa Enke made a decision to speak publicly about his mental health struggles. She explained his battle with depression, the immense pressure he had felt, the fear of being stigmatised. Her courage in doing so changed everything, because Robert Enke's story forced a reckoning. It forced football and society to confront a truth it had long ignored. Mental health struggles don't discriminate. They don't care if you're rich, poor, famous or unknown. Silence kills. In the years since Robert Enke's death, his legacy has become one of hope. The Robert Enke Foundation, established by Teresa and Hannover 96, works tirelessly to support mental health awareness and treatment, particularly for athletes. His story, documented in a powerful biography, A Life Too Short, has opened countless conversations about depression in sport. Today, more athletes speak openly about mental health, more clubs have support systems in place, and more people understand that asking for help isn't weakness, but courage. Robert Enke's life was tragically cut short, but his death wasn't in vain. If you or someone you know is struggling, please do reach out, talk to somebody, and ask for help. Because your life, just like Robert's, matters.